In this first module on epidemiology, you will learn general information about leishmaniasis and the factors that favor transmission of visceral leishmaniasis in East Africa. Leishmaniasis is a parasitic disease transmitted by the bite of an infected phlebotomine sandfly. The term leishmaniasis refers specifically to illness due to infection with a Leishmania protozoa parasite, because being infected with the parasite does not always lead to symptoms of the disease. Leishmaniasis can take different forms. Cutaneous leishmaniasis produces skin ulcers, which may lead to a mucocutaneous form caused by the destruction of mucous membranes of the nose, mouth, and throat. Visceral leishmaniasis, is also known as Kala-Azar, is characterized by irregular bouts of fever, substantial weight loss, swelling of the spleen and liver, and anemia. Visceral leishmaniasis is fatal in more than 95% of cases if left untreated. Leishmaniasis occurs in 200 countries, threatening more than 1 billion people worldwide. Cutaneous leishmaniasis is the commonest form of the disease. Every year, about 200,000 cases are reported to WHO. Visceral leishmaniasis has a smaller distribution range and is highly endemic in the Indian subcontinent and East Africa. About 25,000 cases of visceral leishmaniasis are reported to WHO each year. It is estimated that 10% of these cases are fatal, leading to about 2,000 to 2,500 deaths a year. It is likely that these figures are underestimated because, as for many neglected tropical diseases, cases are often underreported. The risk of being infected mainly depends on the probability of being bitten by an infected sandfly, the vector of the disease. The female sandfly needs blood meals for its eggs to develop. Therefore, she feeds on the blood of humans and animals and may become infected if biting a person or an animal carrying the parasite in its blood. The parasite will develop inside the fly and, after an incubation period of several days, the female fly becomes infectious. While blood feeding, the fly may then inoculate the parasite in a human who was not infected before. A more detailed life cycle is presented in Module 2. Transmission of visceral leishmaniasis in East Africa is anthropootic, meaning that it occurs from human to human and seldom involves wild animals. A disease transmission cycle would start only if both the pathogen and the vector are simultaneously present in the area. In the following section, we discuss the factors that favor the presence of vectors, pathogens, and transmission. The vector of leishmaniasis is a phlebotomine sandfly. The sandfly population follows a seasonal pattern, peaking between March and July, before the rainy season. The availability of suitable habitats is also critical. The sandfly relies on diverse habitats for resting and breeding. Sandfly larvae need humidity, organic matter, and heat to develop. Therefore, any habitat meeting these requirements may be suitable for the sandfly to breed. In East Africa, these conditions may be found in the barks and roots of acacia and balanites trees and inside the cracks in black cotton soil in savanna regions in Sudan, North Ethiopia, and Eritrea. In South Ethiopia and Uganda, sandfly species may be found in association with macrotherms, termite mounds, in both the savanna and forest areas. Around human dwellings, open sewage, and household rubbish may also offer optimal breeding conditions to the sandfly. We saw that the vector can be found in quite diverse natural habitats, but also in other peri-domestic habitats resulting from human activities. Alteration of the environment and inadvertent creation of suitable habitats for the fly, such as open sewage, may enhance sandfly population in a location where it was absent before. Therefore, long-term climate change, as well as poor housing and sanitary settings associated with low socioeconomic conditions, might favor the presence of the sandfly in an area. Let's look at the factors that favor the presence of the pathogen in an environment. Because humans are the main source of Leishmania infection, the presence of the pathogen in the environment is strongly linked to human demography, and more specifically to the introduction of infected persons from an endemic area into a non-endemic area. Human population displacement may have several cases, such as worker seasonal migration, civil war, or escape of bad environmental conditions like drought. As for the evolution of natural suitable habitats for the vector, long-term climate change may also influence pathogen presence and density through human migration patterns. While the co-presence of vectors and pathogens in the environment allows transmission of the disease, transmission per se can also be enhanced or reduced depending on the probability of contact between vectors and humans. Therefore, human behavior is also critical in the transmission pattern of the disease. Daily activities in the habitats sheltering sandfly populations, sleeping outside or living in houses made of grassy material, increase exposure to the fly and the risk of being bitten and infected. Again, low socioeconomic conditions that may favor the presence of the sandfly in peri-domestic habitats may also favor risky human behaviors. At the beginning of this presentation, we distinguished the states of being infected with the parasites and having leishmaniasis with disease symptoms. Indeed, remember, being infected does not necessarily lead to the disease. Prospective studies on visceral leishmaniasis have assessed that between 2% and 25% of infected cases will develop the disease, depending on the countries investigated. A given number of conditions may increase the risk of becoming sick after infection. The most critical factor for developing the disease is the health condition of the infected person. Malnutrition, immune suppression linked to HIV, for instance, and genetic factors or other illness increase the probability of becoming sick. Therefore, socioeconomic conditions of the infected population are also critical in the prevalence of the disease. We also observed that gender-specific behaviors, such as working in the field for men, bias the prevalence of the disease towards this gender. Finally, as children might be less immunocompetent than adults, the age of the infected person may also influence the probability of developing the disease. In East Africa, visceral leishmaniasis is mainly found in children aged between 5 and 14 years, with some exception in Ethiopia, where young male migrant workers are the most affected group. Infected people that do not develop leishmaniasis but keep the parasite in the body are called asymptomatic carriers. They are detected by laboratory methods such as serological test, polymerase chain reaction, or Leishmanen skin test. We will address these different methods in Module 6. Despite a positive serological test, these persons appear healthy and do not recall having had any leishmaniasis symptoms in the past. These asymptomatic carriers play an important role in the transmission cycle because they can transmit the parasite to a sandfly that would blood feed on them. They hence act as a reservoir of the disease. Therefore, detection and management of these persons are critical for control and elimination programs. Unfortunately, the epidemiology of asymptomatic infection is still poorly understood.